Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for the final round of the 2024 Manufacturers Cup exhibition season taking place at Nurburgring Endurance, and we're all in the Group 3 cars. So let's take a quick look at the race details where fuel and tire are both at ×1. For GT1, this is a 5-lap race. For those in GT2 and 3, it is a 3-lap race. And we're only using the racing hard tires. There are no mandatory pit stops, no mandatory tire changes. Damage is on heavy for those in GT1, light for those in GT2 and 3, and you can adjust your brake balance. Now, I am a bit suspicious about this race because Nurburgring Endurance is a track where rain can show up. So, because of that, I highly suggest purchasing the Racing Intermediate and wet tires just in case rain does happen to show up. It is better to have those tires and not need them than to need them and not have them. Like, go do it right now. Like now. Because don't say I didn't warn you if rain does show up and you don't have those tires. Now, I do want to highlight some ways to tell if rain is going to show up. So the first one is before you start your qualifying and before you start your race, you're in the pre-race menu. You can click on the weather radar on the lower left hand corner of the screen and you can zoom out to see if rain will be showing up in your race. It does take the last 60 minutes in game. So if you are getting closer towards present time and you see rain showing up and heading over to the racetrack, yeah, you might get some rain in your race. Now, another way is when you're in the actual race itself. If you look at the lower right hand corner of the screen, you'll see the course map. If you press D left or D right on your controller, you can eventually scroll across multiple displays, and one of them is the weather radar, and you can press D up or D down to zoom in or out. I prefer it zoomed out, that way I can see if rain is heading towards me. And at least in sport mode races, sometimes the rain crawls over to the racetrack. Sometimes it moves over really quickly, so that is something that you want to pay attention to. And if rain is about to hit your track, you will need to time your pit stop perfectly. But again, this is if rain shows up in the race. I don't know if rain will be scripted or if it'll be dynamic weather where in one time slot it'll be pouring rain and another time slot it's completely dry. I don't know the weather. In time trial it's dry, but just because it's dry in the time trial doesn't mean it's going to be like that when you do your qualifying or the actual race. So that's why I mentioned the weather radar before the qualifier, before the race itself, and the weather radar because you want to have that information ready in case rain does show up and you might need to adjust your strategies. But one thing I definitely want to say, and this is because I need to warn you again, make sure you have the Racing Intermediate and wet tires ready because you never know if rain may actually show up. Now, I did do a test run or simulation run, at least in the GT1 settings, but this will also cover the GT2 and 3 settings because most of the settings are the same. The main difference here is the number of laps and damage, but we're not going to talk about damage. We're just going to talk about the number of laps. But let's say rain never shows up, then it's going to be a pretty straightforward zero-stop race. Fuel will not be an issue at all for all 3 GT leagues. Tire wear, not an issue at all. So it's pretty much drive fast, drive hard, and try not to crash, especially if you're in the GT1 league. But again, that is if rain never shows up in your race. One thing that you do want to be careful with is that we are on the racing hard tires, and with the tire wear turned on, there is also tire temperature, which means that when you start your race, you're gonna have really cold tires. So you do need to drive around a bit carefully as your tires start to warm up. That way you don't push your car too hard at the very start of the race and end up spinning out. Now, especially if you're on the Nordschleife section, you want to be really careful when you're trying to pass someone, as the road here or the track here is pretty narrow. There's very little room for mistakes, so if you happen to make a little oopsie and clip the grass, then you might end up spinning out. You might have an aggressive makeout session with barrier R, and you're not going to have a great day after that. But let's go ahead and skip on over towards the end of the race for those in GT2 and 3 leagues. So if rain never shows up in your race, it's a pretty straightforward 0-stop race. Fuel, not an issue. Tire wear, not an issue. Strive hard, be careful, don't crash. And let's go ahead and get ready to end the race for you guys. Just try to be nice and careful through here. Really easy to overshoot this braking point. Nice and careful getting back on the throttle. And with this, I was able to do the race in 23 minutes and 55 seconds. So this is for those in GT2 and 3. So your race will be around 25 minutes, give or take, depending on how fast the lobby is. But we will continue on with those in GT1, where for the love that is all holy, please do not get dirty tires. Please do not crash into anything or anyone, because especially with the heavy damage, if you get damage, then it's pretty much going to be GG's for you. It's going to be game over, because here I just clip into the grass, so I didn't think I had dirty tires, but in reality I did. Gonna try to brake for this turn. I also clip the grass on the right, and I'm gonna lose control, and I'm gonna end up aggressively making out with barrier R. Please don't do that. Please do not crash into the walls or anyone, because with heavy damage, that damage will carry on with you until you pit, and especially if it's a completely dry race, your race is done. And yeah, look at this idiot, still forgetting that dirty tires are a thing. Spins out into a wall. But yeah, don't be like me, guys, please. I know damage is turned off because this is a custom race, but in the real thing, I probably would have just rage quit if I were honest with you. But yeah, please don't crash. That's the moral of this story here. But let's go on over towards the end of the race, where there is a little bit of tire wear, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Fuel, not an issue at all. And again, this is if the race is completely dry and rain never shows up. By the way, have I told you guys to make sure you have the racing intermediate and wet tires ready, just in case rain does show up? Yeah, I don't think I warned you guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and warn you about that. But yeah, I don't know why, but for lap number 5, I just ended up having skill issues. I ended up going a bit slower. Not sure why, but we're just gonna go ahead and carry on, as I don't have much time to edit this video, which is why you're getting this video a heck of a lot earlier than usual. But for those in GT1, there should be around 40 minutes, give or take, if rain never shows up. Probably could have done it 39 minutes 50 seconds, but hey, this doofus crashed. He crashed twice, so yeah, please don't crash. But now comes the super scuffed lap guide, where we're just gonna go through this rapid fire style, as there's too many turns and I don't want to have you guys here all day for this lap guide. So we're gonna go through this without stopping the video. So for turn number 1, you're gonna brake before the tarmac on the left ends. So it's gonna be right about here. So before the tarmac on the left ends, that is where you start to brake. Try to clip the apex, as there's a little dip which will let the car turn in just a little bit more. And you want to be really careful getting back on the throttle, as the racing hard tires don't provide that much grip, especially at the start of the race. Your tires will be cold, so you do need to be even more careful when you're starting to drive around. Now for this section, you're going to brake just as you go under the metal frame. I don't know what it's called, but you want to try to hug the right side of the track and just be really careful getting back on the throttle. Brake before the 50-meter board. Bring yourself towards the left right away, and just try to be really careful to here. Really easy to overshoot this turn. You can see right there, got on the throttle too early and ended up clipping the gravel, which will ruin a bit of my momentum. For this chicane, you can brake at around the 75-meter mark. and you can take advantage of the red and white curves as they are still within track limits. Then you want to be really careful through this section. Here it is pretty bumpy as you enter the Nordschleife section, and you have to be really careful getting back on the throttle, as it's really easy to have the bump unsettle the car as you're getting back on the throttle. This right kink, quick lift off our throttle, and you want to brake right around here for these series of turns. You do need to brake a bit early as you want to try to get yourself set up for the next series of turns. Nice and careful getting back on the throttle, and yeah, also here got to be careful getting back on the throttle. Really easy to spin out there, especially if you go down to second gear in the Porsche. For Flugplatz, you are turning in just as you reach the dip and lift off our throttle, and if you do it just right, you'll be able to carry quite a bit of speed through Flugplatz. I really like saying that word. But anyways, here it's flat out for a while. You'll eventually approach two signs that are on either side of the track or both sides of the track. That's where you lift off our throttle and turn in, brake before the curb on the left ends. And here you can get away with being on third gear. Sometimes if you shift down to second gear, the car might step out just a little bit, so that is something that you do want to be aware of in case you do want to shift down to second gear. Here you want to brake before the sign on the right, and you do need to bring yourself towards the left because there's this right turn coming up right away. Gotta set yourself up for it. Down to first gear for more rotation, exit on second gear, nice and careful getting back on the throttle, and then just take a little breather. But eventually you want to bring yourself towards the right side of the track. A little bit of trail braking for this left turn, then brake when you reach the writing that is on the ground right there. Be careful about clipping the grass because I almost just did that. Look for the signs on the left. That's your next braking point. Down in second gear, you can brake just a little bit later than where I braked, as that was a hair bit too early. Little lift off our throttle right here just to let the car turn in a bit more, then brake before the curb on the right starts. Now there is a brown patch of grass on the left, and I use that as my braking point for these series of turns. Going under first gear for more rotation, exit on second gear, and be really careful getting back on the throttle. Really easy to spin out here. Brake before the curb on the right ends, and you can just go down to third gear, brake before the curb on the left ends. You can go down to second gear for more rotation. If you do stay on second gear, be careful getting back on the throttle because as you saw right there, I almost lost control of the car. Now you're going to look for the black Yokohama sign on the right, brake before you pass it, go down to second gear for more rotation. You can exit on third gear, just be aware that you might have a bit lower revs if you do exit on third gear. And here you can take a nice breather as we are going to be going flat out for quite some time. But we will fast forward through this for just a bit as we slowly approach the quickly approach the bravery corner. Brake before the curb on the right ends and then turn in. You want to be careful getting back on the throttle, or really easy to clip the grass on the right and end up spinning out. Little lift off of the throttle right there. Brake before the curb on the left starts. Try to hug the right side of the track. Nice and careful getting back on the throttle. And brake just as you pass the final happy little tree that is on the left. Be really careful about braking too late because it is really easy to get spit out of the carousel, and that's going to cost you time. But anyways, be really careful getting back on the throttle when you exit the carousel. This left turn is flat out. Brake before the curb on the right starts. Down to third gear. Nice and careful getting back on the throttle. And then you want to brake right around here before the curb on the left ends. And then you will need to lift off our throttle for this right turn. Use a little bit of braking for this left turn. And yeah, more throttle control. Brake before the curb on the left ends. Down to third gear. Use the Yokohama sign on the right as your cue to get back on the brakes. Then brake before the gray curb on the left ends. Brake before the curb on the left ends. Nice and careful back on the throttle. Be careful about this gray stuff on the left as there is not that much grip there. And you need to brake early for that turn because you can see right there I was way off of the apex by about a country mile. Brake just before you make this jump right here. Down to 4th gear. Nice and careful back on the throttle, especially as you go through this left turn. You can do a little courtesy lift right here as there's a little jump and that can potentially lift the front end of the car. So yeah, you can do a little courtesy lift there. Brake just after you pass the path on the right. Down to 5th gear. Brake when the curb on the right ends. And then you want to brake before the curb on the right ends and be really careful getting back on the throttle as you exit the mini carousel. Really easy to spin out right there. Brake before the curb on the left ends. I sound like a broken record at this point. Lift off of the throttle before you pass the track marshals on the left, and then you can take a nice long breather. Now we'll fast forward towards the end of the lap, where you want to look for the end of the curb that is on the right. Well, we're not there yet, but look for the end of the curb that is on the right, as that is your braking point right about now. Go down to 2nd gear in the Porsche. Nice and careful getting back on the throttle. Really easy to mess it up at the end of the lap. And that is it for this lap. So pretty scuffed guide. And with this one, I was able to get a 754.4. But yeah, not much time for me to record and edit today, so I had to get it out now, as I'm going to be prepping all week before I go out of state. Woo! Yeah, I'm going to be involved in some pretty fun stuff, some pretty silly shenanigans. So that's all from me. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.